Are you hoping to become a better investor, a better business person, a better entrepreneur? Well, today's show is for you because we discuss the concept of behavioural finance, which is the study of the effects of psychology on investors and on financial markets. But don't worry, it's not woo-woo stuff and it's not technical. Instead, I share a number of quotes from my favourite author, Morgan Housel, and Mark Creedon and I will explain why investors often appear to lack self-control, why they often act against their own best interests and make decisions based on personal biases instead of facts. Now, whether you're a beginning investor or well down the track in your investment journey, I'm sure today's show will give you some insights, because you're probably twice as biased as you think. And if you don't think this applies to you, you're probably 4 times as biased as you think. So welcome to today's show.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's authority in wealth creation through property, who has been voted one of Australia's top 50 most influential thought leaders.
Do you want to become better with your finances? Well, you could do a lot worse than learning from my favourite author, Morgan Housel, who's author of The Psychology of Money and whose blogs regularly appear in Collaborative Fund. And in fact, many years ago, he used to write for The Motley Fool. One of my favourite books is his book, The Psychology of Money, where he shares 19 stories exploring the strange way people think about money. And he teaches us how to make better sense of one's lives in regard to money. So today I'd like to discuss a number of his quotes with Mark Creedon, founder and CEO of Business Accelerator Mastermind, to give you a better understanding of why we don't tend to act rationally when it comes to money or finances. Hi, Mark.
Hello, Michael. This is a great topic, by the way.
Yes. Well, look, I think Warren Buffett's probably the most quoted investment guru around, but Morgan Housel's probably coming up to be number 2, and being much, much younger than Warren, he's by no means as successful an investor, but his take on the way we think about money has become very popular. So let's have a look at it. And what he said was doing well with money isn't necessarily about what you know. It's about how you behave. And behaviour is hard to teach, he says, even to really smart people.
Yeah, it's interesting, Michael, because, doing well with money does actually has a little to do with how smart you are, but really a lot more to do with how you behave. And you and I both know people who are very smart, much smarter than you and I, who are really not very good with their money habits or their money behaviours.
Now, interestingly, only today I spoke with a client who I asked, what do you think it is that separates the small group of very successful property investors from that large group of people who don't achieve the financial success they want? And she gave me 2 reasons, and one of them, she said, was because they're smarter. And I said, in fact, that's not true. I explained that some of my most successful clients are dumb. I hope they're not listening to this, because they say, hey, look, there's a multi-millionaire who successfully educated more successful people in Australia about property than anyone else. I'm actually going to listen to him. And interestingly, the way we help people at Metropole become successful in property is too simple for some smart people. They actually look for more complicated ways. And I guess the theme of our chat today is really about the topic of behavioural finance. Your outside world is very much a reflection of your inner world. Your thoughts lead to your feelings lead to your actions lead to results. And we were all taught about money by our parents, by things we heard, by things we saw, by things we experienced, by things we didn't hear if they didn't talk about money, Mark.
Well, that's right. And I guess the other thing, Michael, when we learn it away from that, or even if we did learn it from our parents, things about money, investing, personal finance, and even business decisions, they're kind of typically taught as I guess you'd call it a maths-based field, really, where it's data and formulas, but it doesn't apply to the real world. I mean, people don't make financial decisions based on a spreadsheet, do they? They make them at the dinner table in a meeting room, or out of personal history or experiences or their unique view of the world, really, I think, Michael.
Well, it's their emotions that override any level of intelligence. And we've seen this in the last couple of years where people sold up their property investments because the market boomed when it was the wrong thing to do, but emotions got the better of them. So one of Morgan Housel's quotes is, be careful when reading about how stupid investors can be, not realising that you're reading about yourself.
It's the Dunning-Kruger effect, is it not?
That's right. There's a nice way of saying that dumb people are so dumb they don't realise they're dumb, but that's not exactly the official definition of it, is it?
No, it's not. Well, I mean, I think that, and again, we've seen that people feel that when you're talking to people. I know talking to people about business and decisions, and they'll sit and they'll look and they'll nod very knowingly, and they're absolutely convinced that you're talking about whoever it is you're talking about. They really need to pull their socks up and get to know things better, and they don't actually realise that you're talking about them. Yeah.
That's right. Okay, another Morgan Housel quote was, the problem with economic forecasting is that things you can predict tend not to matter, and the things you can't predict make all the difference in the world. Boy, have we found that out over the last year or two, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what is it? Your personal experiences with money make up, a fraction, 0.000, 1% of what's actually happened in the world. But maybe 80% of how you think the world works.
Yeah, we all think we know how the world works because we've only experienced a tiny sliver of it. So therefore, we put our thoughts, our emphases, our biases on this. And then we start worrying and forecasting about things. But every year there's an X factor. Many, many years ago, I learned this concept from Don Stammers, who was a leading economist at the time. And Mark, you're old enough to remember the BRW magazine that then became part of the Australian Financial Review. And every year he'd look back at the year and see what was the X factor that came out of the blue that made all the best forecasts go to waste. I guess last year, one would say it would have been COVID. This year, it could well be the war in Ukraine and Russia that's created inflation, that's boomed and boosted inflation to push up interest rates around the world. Sometimes these X factors are on the positive side. Sometimes they're on the negative side. And so forecasting, I guess you have to, people need to, we like to think we know what's ahead, but Morgan Housel's comments were that it's the things that you can't predict that actually make all the difference.
Well, I mean, we talk about it in investing, we talk about it in property, in business. Planning is important, but I think the really important part of the plan is to plan on the plan, not actually going to plan. So you've got to be prepared for some changes. And so you talk about forecasting. If we just take forecasting and we march blindly into the future based entirely on that forecast, then that X factor is going to come along and it's going to sideswipe us and it's going to catch us off guard.
So you assume the worst, hope for the best, and accept reality. And I guess the other thing is you've got to learn to change your mind as often as facts change, Mark.
Oh, you do. And the other thing too, Michael, is that the reality is things are just, they're much harder in reality or in practice than they are in theory. You can read all the theory, you can read all the textbooks on these things, and you can listen to all the forecasters. But when you're in the trenches actually doing it, then it's a much harder experience.
Now, in my field, in my area, we're talking about property, and most people listening to this podcast are interested in property, in finance, in wealth. But I know a lot are also in business, and your area of expertise, and even though you're a successful property investor with your wife, Caroline, you also deal with business people, and it's really much the same in business, isn't it? Where you as an outsider can see the theories, you can see what's going on, you can see what people are doing wrong, but those in the trenches, in the word you used a moment ago, they can't see how they're behaving irrationally.
Yeah, they're too close, sort of wood for the trees. But we often see people in business, again, like this forecasting, they've got this massive plan that's 20, 30, 40 pages long, and they've spent an awful lot of time, effort, money, blood, sweat, tears putting it together. And they think that it's a cast in stone roadmap as opposed to it being a guideline. I mean, our business plan, Michael, as you know, in Mastermind is one page. And it's one page for that reason, because it's meant to be super simple that can take into account changing circumstances as they come along.
Well, in business, as you often say, there are 100 things you can do, but there are probably only 2 or 3 things you should do. In fact, sometimes if you're just thinking about the day, what to do on a day-to-day basis, what's the most important thing you can do? And that's why it's actually really useful having a business coach, somebody on the outside, somebody who can see your blind spots, just like we believe that property investors need a property strategist to see what's going on. Another great quote from Morgan Housel was, getting rich and staying rich are different things and require different skills. And that's definitely got to do with investing. But I bet you'll also have a take on that with regard to business, because we see so many businesses kick off and start off well and then go by the wayside. But let's talk about the money side of things and the finance and investing side bit first.
Well, I mean, I think that what Morgan says there is that, getting money requires that you take risks. You need to be optimistic. You need to put yourself out there. But on the other hand, keeping the money requires, to a degree, an opposite of that. It requires some humility, some fear. There's some fear that what you've made could be taken away from you, frugality, and I think, Michael, also an acceptance that at least some of what you've made is attributable to luck.
You're right. Some people had a free kick in the football expression last year or the year before. They bought a property anywhere they could in Australia and it went up in value. And they thought, hey, look, I know about this property stuff now, but past success can't be relied on. You can't repeat that indefinitely, can you?
No, and we see that in property, we see that in business. I mean, we see it in life generally. I think, was it Napoleon's definition of a military genius was the man who can do the average thing when everyone else around him is losing his mind. It reminds me very much, Michael, my love of poetry. It reminds me very much of the Rudyard Kipling poem, If, which starts with, if you can keep your head while all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. So, I mean, I think that's a sort of a very similar definition, isn't it?
It is. So I guess what he's getting at is, yes, you have to take risks when you get going. You have to, as you said, be optimistic. You've got to, whether it's in property, in business, in relationships, and then you can't become complacent. Boy, have we seen people become complacent in business, in the world of Business Accelerator Mastermind, which we're business partners in, where people think they're invincible.
Yeah. Oh, well, and I think the other thing too is, as Morgan Housel says, that good investing isn't necessarily about earning the highest returns, because the highest returns can be sort of one-off hits, and you can't repeat them. And that comes down to that X factor or a bit of luck, that free kick, as you say. Whereas instead, if you can earn pretty good returns that you stick with, that can be repeated for a long period of time, that's when compounding really, really runs wild, both in terms of money management, property, and business for that matter.
Sure. So most financial mistakes come when you actually try and force things to happen faster than is required, because the point you made a moment ago, compounding is that great wonder of the world, which if you leave and you allow good located properties to increase over time with capital growth, you're going to be ahead of the people that are looking for the latest hotspot, which next year becomes the next not spot.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
Now, I love one of his quotes, which says, imagine how much stuff you'd have to make up if you were forced to talk 24/7. I thought about that, and then he goes on to say, well, remember this next time you're watching the financial news on TV, Mark.
Well, it's true. I mean, in lots of ways, I think, Michael, investors were probably better informed 20 years ago when there was actually 90% less financial news, because people didn't have to pad things out just to fill the space.
Yeah. Look, predictions, opinions, forecasts, I think that probably should be discounted by the number of times the person makes them into TV each week. Look, going back to the BRW, I remember a good friend of mine, also named Michael at the time, we used to get the BRW, and there used to be these, when we were young and we were building our careers and our businesses, and these people used to be featured on the front cover of these successful business people. And being young, we thought, gee, I'd love to be there one day. And it's interesting when a couple of years later you see that their businesses have failed. And I don't want anyone's business to fail. This is not a tall poppy story. I actually like to hear successes, but it's very interesting that those who get the most airtime are very frequently the ones you should be least paying attention to.
Well, that's right, because often, unfortunately, with those people getting airtime, their focus is actually on the airtime, not on the success. So there's an awful lot of smoke and mirrors going on at times. And I think the other thing too, and we all fall into this trap, the more you want something to be true, the more likely you are to believe a story that overestimate the odds of it actually being true.
So back to the initial wording, just be conscious of the fact that, well, he talked about the 24/7 financial news on TV, but it's actually the same on social media or anywhere else, that really they've got to pad it. So they've got to come up with stuff. And just because somebody has got an opinion, and everyone's got an opinion, doesn't mean that you should be listening to them for advice. Now, I thought another interesting concept I learned from Morgan Housel is that he calls the market, and he's talking about the stock market in particular, which is a whole lot of people guessing what other people are going to do and what the value of shares are. But it's the same with any market. He says the market is rational, but investors are playing different games, and those games look irrational to people playing a different game.
Yeah, I think he sort of made the point that a lot of these financial debates, if you like, that you listen to are just people with different time horizons actually talking over each other.
Yeah. So beware of taking financial cues from people who are playing a different game to you. So I'm a successful investor and I'm at a very different stage of my life. And so don't judge your chapter 1 or 2 to my chapter 30 or 40, and I'm much older than that now anyway, but I'm much further in. So what I need to invest in and how I need to invest is very different from somebody who's growing their or beginning their portfolio.
I think it's a really good point that you make about not comparing, someone's chapter 2 or 3 to your chapter 30 or 40. And probably the other thing about that, Michael, is that when you look at, it relates back to what we were saying before about, pundits and forecasters, etc. But often when you look at what's going on for people, and particularly in the current social media climate, one thing that you always say that I love is that you only ever get to see the highlight reel. You don't get to see what's on the cutting room floor. So you see all of the success they have. And I had a friend years ago who was a big gambler. And he'd always, every time I saw him, he'd tell me all about his wins. But he never, ever told me about his losses.
Interesting. That's right. Actually, that's something I haven't done for a long, long time. I actually used to enjoy a little bit going to the casino, putting money on red or black, because at least I had a 50-50 chance, and I'd always come out a little bit down. But it's one of the things that in Tom Corley's Rich Habit studies found that the wealthy people don't gamble. I mean, the lottery is really a tax for people who can't do maths, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yes. If you actually stopped and do...
But a couple of weeks ago, there was a $160 million first prize in the lottery. And for a few seconds, I was tempted, because $160 million would change my life.
It's an awful lot of money.
I don't think anyone got the first prize, though, Mark.
I think 3 people got it.
Oh, they shared it in some way.
Yeah, 3 people shared it. Yeah. Mind you, I mean, let's not sneeze at $55 million.
No, that would get rid of some of our debts. So back to Morgan Housel's comments about the market being rational, but it's all playing different games. I guess really what he's getting at is that everyone's making a bet on an unknown future, and to them it's rational, but it's only speculation if you disagree with what somebody else is betting on.
Yeah, and you said this at the very outset, Michael, that most of the things that we learn about money, we learn from our parents. So people may do some crazy things with money, but no one's crazy. And I think it comes down to this: people from different generations, raised by different parents, who different incomes, had different values in different parts of the world, born into different economies, different job markets, different incentives. I think different degrees of luck, and all of those put together into a great big melting pot mean that you learn very different lessons.
That's right. And I guess that's why there's markets, Mark, because if everyone thought property was going to go up, they wouldn't sell, they'd only be buying. If everyone thought the share market would go up, again, there wouldn't be buyers and sellers. So the market is people with different opinions of what's ahead or where best to put their money. Yeah,
exactly. And I think that the other big thing to keep in mind about that is that, when things are going well, just to keep in mind and to realize it's not as good as you think, Michael, is it?
Yes. I guess that's one of the lessons I've learned along the way, and I know you have, that you're not invincible. And as we've already said, there is an element of luck to things. But interestingly, you can help create your own luck by having knowledge, by being informed, by being ready, by being prepared to take action. So there's some dumb luck, I guess, that happens to you. Dumb good luck and dumb bad luck that's out of your control. But I think you can also put yourself in the position to be lucky, Mark.
Yeah, you can. I mean, if you realize that luck brought you success, and you realize that you can work with luck and risk, then you can actually turn your story around.
Yeah. Now, the next quote from Morgan Housel is one that I know that you spend a lot of time with the people who are part of Business Accelerator Mastermind, our tribe, because you teach them the importance of controlling their time. And Morgan Housel's quote was, "Controlling your time is the highest dividend money pays."
Yeah, I really like that. So in Mastermind, we call it working in your genius, but it's understanding the highest and best use of your time. And I have to say, Michael, it's something that a lot of people don't understand. And in fact, it's something that you taught me to fine tune even more for my own time, to understand the highest and best value of your time, and understanding that that's really where the dividend lies, doesn't it?
Yes, that's right. Now, I've got a number of further really good, well, I believe they're good quotes from Morgan Housel I want to comment on. But before we do, we've mentioned Business Accelerator Mastermind a couple of times. So for those who are wondering, what are they on about? Why don't you explain what we're talking about?
Yeah, great. I mean, Business Accelerator Mastermind is a business coaching program, Michael. As you know, it's designed for service business owners, professionals in private practice who have a business that is just too reliant on them. So if they're looking to increase their revenue, decrease the amount of time that they need to spend in their business without having a downward effect on their revenue, and then we've got a system and a process that we can help them to implement to achieve exactly that.
Well, it all started, with you and my relationship well over a decade ago when a common friend suggested, because I was looking for a business coach and I'd had a number of business coaches and I had grown my previous one. And I said, who do you know? And Kevin recommended you and you became our coach. And I still haven't outgrown you over 10 years because you've grown as well. More than that, though, I started referring other directors of Metropole to you and then a number of our clients. And when I saw the great results, I wanted part of the business, and we've become business partners together with your wife, Caroline. And so therefore, while I'm not directly daily involved in it, we speak 2 or 3 times a day, but I've been very impressed with how we've been helping a very wide range of people, from solopreneurs to quite large multi-franchise, even a multi-franchise car dealer, or people with offices in various states. And I think the fact that you're not a coach for cabinet makers or for pool shop owners or whatever, I think that's actually one of the advantages, Mark.
Yeah, I think it is, because the difficulty that, and Michael, you and I just recently had the privilege of speaking at an industry conference, and one of the things that I see is those conferences are great, but you're speaking with people in your own industry. And so what they know is what's going on in your industry. So the great advantage I've got is that, I get to see something's working in a car dealership and I sort of go, well, there's no reason why that can't work in a law practice. There's no reason why we can't pick that concept up and tweak it and make it work. And probably that lawyer would never know about that concept because they're not going to hang out at car dealership conferences and vice versa.
So my recommendation to you, if you're listening to this and you are in a practice, private practice, or in a business, and by the way, those who aren't, wait a minute, because we're getting onto some really good quotes from Morgan Housel, but if you are, why not have a chat with Mark? I'm going to leave a link in the show notes, because 2023 is going to be an interesting year. It's going to be a challenging year. There's going to be headwinds for business, but it's also the year that some people actually are going to be very, very successful and able to take their businesses to the next level. So why not at least have a chat with Mark and see if you could benefit from using the same business coach I do, Mark?
Yeah, let's see what's possible. You're right. There's going to be some headwinds. Do you know what? I reckon there's going to be some fantastic tailwinds for people if they get the right advice and do things the right way.
Sure. Okay, back to Morgan Housel's quotes. One of the ones that I think we've got to keep remembering is, no one is as impressed with your possessions as much as you are.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't mind your Bentleys though, Michael.
Yes, you're right. I guess he was saying don't try and keep up with the Joneses without realising the Joneses, they're probably not as happy as you are.
Yeah, it's very true. And it's interesting. I had a friend a number of years ago who to the outward world was very successful, had a very successful business, a beautiful home, beautiful cars. And I used to meet with him and sort of, catch up, and we'd walk or go to the gym, till one day he broke down and told me how unbelievably unhappy he was. So I think it's a great lesson to make sure that you are not keeping up with the Joneses and following on your own journey and your own success and what matters to you.
Now, Again, this has been an interesting, challenging year where there have been all sorts of predictions, but just go back last year and the year before and people were talking about a fiscal cliff and an interest rate cliff and an unemployment cliff and a real estate Armageddon. And Morgan Housel says, read last year's market predictions and you'll never again take this year's predictions seriously.
Yeah. What is it? Read fewer forecasts and more history, Michael.
Yeah, I guess that's right. Or maybe you should study more failures and fewer successes. If failures were writing books, you probably wouldn't bother buying them, but boy, there'd be some good lessons there.
Well, there is. And, I actually read a book. There's a book called The Power of Moments. And in it, there's a story about this American Olympic athlete. And they were talking about what drove her to success. And she said when she was a child, her father used to ask her most days, what's something you failed at today? So he wanted them to study failures as opposed to only the successes. So, yeah, I think probably a nice thought then to think about reading more books and fewer articles. I'd rather read those sorts of books than maybe
the
some
detailed stuff.
Yeah, the articles.
I guess the takeaway from economic history is that the past probably wasn't as good as you remember, and the present isn't as bad as you think, and the future is going to be better than you anticipate. I know you're an optimist, I'm an optimist, and I'd much rather wake up an optimist or realistic about the future. Now, you've got to be more than realistic, Mark. I think you've got to wake up believing that there's more people out there wanting to do good in the world than are wanting to do bad.
Oh, absolutely. Michael, I can remember having a conversation with you at the beginning of 2020 when COVID was just sort of starting to take a hold in Australia, at least. And there were those out there that were claiming this was Armageddon, that the world was going to end, the economy was going to crash, we were going to have millions and millions of people dying in Australia. It was a horrible outlook, but it's interesting when you look back on it, and I guess that's a really good reason why you should look at last year's forecasts and realize that they're very rarely as accurate as people think they're going to be.
That's right. Interestingly, though, pessimism in some ways tends to sound smarter than optimism. Optimists, I'm getting this with the trolls that follow me on YouTube. I have a lot of fun with them. Basically, optimism often sounds like a sales pitch to these people, while pessimism tends to sound like somebody's trying to help you, Mark.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Michael, I think the other quote that I like from Morgan Housel, we were talking about the concept of not keeping up with the Joneses, and he said, if your expectations grow faster than your income, you'll never be happy with your money, no matter how much you accumulate.
Interesting, isn't it, Mark? Yes.
Yeah, it is. And we often see that the people's expectations grow much faster. And I mean, you and I have had some conversations sometimes where, we've wanted things to happen much quicker than they are. And we just have to be patient. And I think that's how you set yourself up for success as opposed to actually setting yourself up for disappointment.
Right. Back to those pessimists and trolls on the internet. They keep mentioning other people's YouTube channels who have got huge followings, those ones who are always talking about doom and gloom and dire predictions. And I guess one of Morgan Housel's other quotes really sums that all up. Tell people what they want to hear, and you can be wrong indefinitely without penalty.
Well, we know a couple of commentators that would fall into that category, fairly and squarely, Michael. I think that when and where you were born can have a bigger impact on your outcome in life than anything you do intentionally. And we often talk about how lucky we are to be born in this time, in this country.
Very much so. And despite all the problems that are going on in the world, when else would you have liked to have been born, and where else would you like to be? So for you, you were lucky you were born here. For me, I'm lucky my parents brought me here when I was the age of 3. And I'm sure a lot of people listening to this similarly started elsewhere and actually came here because of the great country we live in. One of Morgan Housel's themes, and we've spoken about it before in previous podcasts, is the various biases we have. So we all think we're rational. We all think we're thinking in a normal way, but we come into the world, we look at things, and especially if it's got to do with money, property, businesses, with tinted glasses, maybe rose-coloured glasses that make it sound good, but we all got tinted glasses on, and we're wearing different glasses of different tinted shades, and we don't realise we're doing them. So he says you're twice as biased as you think you are, and 4 times if you disagree with that statement.
Well, but it's 100% correct. I mean, I know at Wealth Retreat, you often talk about all the various biases, including bias. So you believe you don't have a bias. So,
Well, you and I are already talking about Wealth Retreat 2023, which is going to be on April 29th to May the 3rd on the Gold Coast. And Wealth Retreat is where we get together for 5 days in a room of very already successful business people, entrepreneurs and investors. And we talk about real wealth. And real wealth isn't how big your business is, even though more than half the people there are business people. And that's why you're a big part of Wealth Retreat. A lot of people they're all interested in property and in improving. But we talk about true wealth, which is your family, relationships, contribution, time, health, appreciation. So if you have ever thought about wanting to join us at Wealth Retreat, this is the year you've got to come. This is the year when being around a group of already successful movers and shakers is going to make a difference to you. Go to wealthretreat.com.au. I'm going to leave a link in the show notes because, Mark, I know that we still every year get a lot out of it. The teacher gets as much out of it as the students by preparing. And the content this year is going to have to be very different to previous years because the world we live in is very different.
yeah, very much so. It's interesting, Michael. I don't use the term life-changing very often, but Wealth Retreat certainly falls into that category of the number of people I've seen come along and walk away from it and go, wow, that actually just made a significant change in my life. And I guess that's one of the really rewarding things about it, isn't it?
Yes, it is, Mark, and I know it's one of the highlights of our year, and it's one of the reasons a lot of people come back a second, third and fourth time, and you think, why would people who are already successful spend $12,000 in 5 days wanting to improve more? And I guess that's part of the reason they are successful, because they learned the information they need to know, and it helps them get to the next level. Morgan Housel clearly actually said there are two types of information: stuff you'll still care about in the future and stuff that matters less and less over time. So long-term versus expiring knowledge. And it's critical to identify which these are when you come across something new. So the lessons that we talk about at Wealth Retreat are things that are, as you said a moment ago, and we're not using the term lightly, life-changing. It can create life-changing wealth. Another part of it is actually risk management, because there are going to be risk management issues coming up. And I believe, as I'm using Morgan Housel's words, risk management is less about how you respond to risk and more about recognizing how many things can go wrong before they actually do, which in many ways is preparing yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think that that risk is really, it's what you can't see, or it's what you think only happens to other people, or, things that you're not paying attention to, willfully ignoring. It's not in the news. But sometimes, I think it was John Lennon said that, life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. A little surprise usually does more damage than something that's been in the news for months, Michael.
Yes, it does. Now, again, one of the benefits of Wealth Retreat is we get people to plan the next 5 years of your life. The theme is, where are you going to be in 5 years' time? And we actually get people to think big because, interestingly, when they first start off, their goals are not that big. But when they are given the right tools to establish those goals and then the toolkit to achieve them, that they can achieve amazing things. And one of Morgan Housel's quotes actually fits in with that too, because he says, if you had an idea but think somebody's already done that, just remember there are 1,010 published biographies of Winston Churchill. So just because somebody else has done it before, it's not a reason not to do it. In fact, in many ways, if somebody else has done it, you should be able to do it too.
Well, Michael, I've just realised I've read 2 biographies. You mean I've got another 1,008 biographies of Winston Churchill to read? That's
right. Yeah.
I think one of the big things to keep in mind is that at the end of the day, more people wake up every morning wanting to solve problems than wake up looking to cause harm. The sad part is, though, that the people who cause the harm get the most attention, don't they?
Yes, they do. The media loves that. And I guess that's part of the reason I love these regular chats with you, just to put a different perspective on things. So as we're getting to the end of 2022, we're going to look back. This year had its challenges, but boy, it wasn't as bad as the year before. And when we look back in the future, we're going to think, hey, we got through this. So this is a really good time to think about how you're going to make the next year, the next years, the best of your life. If you're in business, one of the suggestions I'd make is invest in your business, and it is a tax-deductible investment, and get somebody like Mark Creedon on your side and get involved in the Tribe of Business Accelerator Mastermind, because you don't just have Mark, and you don't have just me or the others as part of the Business Accelerator Mastermind team, but you actually have all the other people in the tribe, Mark, and that's probably one of the strengths.
Oh, I think it is. People learn as much, if not more, from each other than they do from us, Michael. So
don't think it's too late in the year to put your comments in and to actually say, I want to speak to him. So what I'm going to do is leave a link in the show notes, and please at least have a chat. You don't have to do anything before Christmas, but do something, as in start, but do something and get ready for next year. Same with property. We'd love to help you in your wealth creation journey through Metropole, and Mark's an important part of that as well. And in particular, if you want to have that life-changing experience of Wealth Retreat, boy, I put 3 plugs in one go, Mark.
Well,
come along to Wealth Retreat. And Mark, thank you very much for these regular sessions. And I'd like to think that our first one next year is going to be the one that's popular we do at the beginning of every year, about looking at all the good things in this world to make us appreciative and grateful.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very much looking forward to that, Michael.
Now here's Michael's mindset message. Remember, a change in your thinking will lead to a change in your life.
In today's Mindset Moment, I want to make it clear that you simply can't think your way to success. Now, I know there's that book, Think and Grow Rich, and I know there's that video movie, The Secret. But what I'm really talking about is the law of attraction. You know, what you think about the most, you become. But the law of attraction's origins are muddy. Some historians say Buddha initially came up with this. He was the first to articulate it. Others say it was Jesus. Look, no one really knows. But we do know that the law of attraction first gained worldwide recognition thanks in large part to Napoleon Hill's 1937 book, Think and Grow Rich. Now, while Hill's version of the law of attraction was heavily weighted towards thinking, it did nevertheless emphasize the importance of taking action on your thoughts. Thinking followed by action, that was really Hill's message. I guess he should have really called his book Think and Find a Good Market Niche and Work Really Hard and Serve Other People and Become Rich. But that probably wouldn't have sold many books, would it? Then in 2006, the law of attraction went under major surgery that took the book into a film, a video, a DVD called The Secret. And The Secret was a big hit. I think it still is. I believe it sold over 20 million copies up to date. And its popularity is anchored in the notion that your thoughts become things. They call it the law of attraction. The Secret promises riches, success, happiness, and an amazing life. And all you have to do is visualize what you want, and that simple act would attract it. That major surgery performed by The Secret it actually removed the organs of action from the patient. No work, no hardship, no obstacles, no goals, no mistakes, no failure. And for the first time, a self-help book offered success without all the effort. I guess that's why millions and millions of people bought the book. But with it, if it had millions of devoted followers, you'd naturally expect an explosion in the number of millionaires since 2006, when all those people learned The Secret. But that didn't happen, did it? Why? Because the real secret is that visualization doesn't attract what you desire. Now, the purpose of visualization is clarity. Visualizing or thinking in pictures about the life you desire forces your conscious and that subconscious part of your brain to work in harmony, revealing or making clear the path you've got to take to produce the life you desire. It turns on that GPS, that search engine in your mind that we call the reticular activating system. You've heard me speak about it before. Your reticular activating system's GPS points you in the right direction, and it keeps you on track while the search engine component of it starts looking for opportunities. Clarity is knowing exactly what you want in life and what you need to do to get what you want. Clarity reveals the path you must take. It provides the blueprint for the life you desire. But the blueprint's just a plan. Executing the plan requires effort. It requires action. So my mindset message for today is, sorry to tell you, you simply can't think your way to success. Well, thanks for spending the last little while with me, and I hope you got some benefit from this show. If you did, and you know somebody else who'd also benefit, please tell them about the Michael Yardney podcast. There's a share button on every podcast app. On Apple Podcasts, there's 3 little buttons down the bottom. Press it and share it, or just tell them about the Michael Yardney podcast. I hope you're going to be doing them a favour, and you'll definitely be doing me a favour and helping me in my quest to make as many people as possible financially literate. Now, there's ways of catching up with me between these shows. Just look for Michael Yardney on social media, or why not join my private Facebook group? Go to Facebook and look for the Property Update Facebook group. And I have a way of saying thank you to you for subscribing to this podcast. Go to podcastbonus.com.au. There'll be a link in the show notes, podcastbonus.com.au, where you can get a bunch of ebooks and reports. My way of saying thank you. And when you've got time, why not listen to some of the old podcasts? There's individual lessons in each of those that I think would be helpful for you. I'll be back again real soon. In the meantime, have a great week. Make it a great week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favourite Android app as the Michael Yardney podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?